you can be in a very dark, kind of turbulent place, and God can lift you out of it in just a moment, as long as you have faith.
Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible. This is day 4, and today we are going to be covering Genesis 12, 13, 14, and 15.
In Genesis 12, Abram moves to Canaan, Bethel, and Egypt. You're going to see him moving around a lot. In Genesis 13, God promises land and many descendants to Abram. In Genesis 14, Lot is taken captive in war. Abram rescues him, and Melchizedek blesses the Lord. And in Genesis 15, God makes the famous covenant with Abram.
UE. Cool. So this kicks off with a weird one, didn't it, really? Because it starts off, and it's going to be the first of a few instances of this, with Abram telling people that his wife is his sister. Just odd, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is strange. It's obviously a lot to do with fear. He's afraid because Sarai is a beautiful woman, and he thinks about the repercussions of sort of showing that they're married and so on. So it's a lot to do with fear, I think.
Yeah. Though interestingly, he tells Pharaoh that he's his sister, and so I guess he gets treated well because of her. He gets loads of sheep and male and female servants and all that kind of stuff. But Pharaoh still takes her as his wife. So what is the fear based on? If he was publicly her husband, they would kill him because she's beautiful. So he's better off just letting her be Pharaoh's wife as well. So he gets spared and gets rich off her, basically. Kind of sounds a bit pimpish.
Yeah, it is a bit pimpish. And I think it's partially that, and also partially that I think that when he's a foreigner in these lands, there's an idea that maybe he would just be murdered. Like if he publicly admitted that he was the husband, they just sort of say, well, you're a foreigner in this land, see you later. They didn't pay so much attention to thou shalt not murder. They weren't under the covenant, right? But yeah, I mean, it's a really negative sort of thing, isn't it? And then I think that we need to shout out to Malia. You were the one that wrote this down and understood it, though, right? Abram sinning directly affects Pharaoh.
Yeah, because I mean, for those of you that haven't been following with us so far, we're doing the Bible Project Bible in 1 Year reading plan, and there's a group of about 20 plus or so of us doing it throughout the year. And these podcasts are something we wanted to do to sort of help encourage people that want to do it in their own time as well. And so sometimes where we draw blanks, it's nice to have a few other people offering some thoughts and input in there as well, because effectively, what Malia was saying was that our sin doesn't just affect us. Like, obviously it affects us eternally, but in the day-to-day life and living out of that, it affects other people. So the fact that Abram's sin in saying that Sarai was his sister, not his wife, that directly affected Pharaoh. And it's Genesis 12, 17. The Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife, Sarah. So first Pharaoh called him in and was like, what have you done? Bugger off.
Pretty much, right? So that is just a reminder that the sins that we have in our own lives don't necessarily just affect us, they affect other people around us, and sometimes in ways that we don't even realize. And bouncing off of this, also Genesis 13 now, God reassures Abraham that he will have a great line of descendants. It's kind of hard to imagine that Abraham would easily believe this, because he's in a foreign land, his wife is shacked up with the Pharaoh, and he's afraid to even admit that they are married.
And she's barren regardless.
And she's barren, and yet God is saying, no, it's going to happen. And just having that faith to continue to follow is pretty inspiring, and gives us a little bit of an insight why, even though Abraham's a sinner the same as all of us, he was the chosen one.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I suppose what's kind of cool is we start to see at least he's building wealth, because admittedly, again, from Pharaoh, but in Genesis 14, he actually has acquired enough male and female servants, enough wealth, enough notoriety, supposedly, that he can actually rescue his uncle Lot, Unky Lot, when...
No, it's Unky. He's Unky Abe.
Oh,
It's
Unky Abe. Got it wrong.
Lot
Sorry.
is the nephew.
Ah, all right.
But I do
But,
like the idea of Unky Lot too. But no, Unky Abe.
Unky Abe rides to the
Lot.
rescue. And I get at this stage, the kings that we're talking about, they're not kings of nations, they're kings of cities. So it's not as, massive, but still he's been doing well enough that he can actually save his nephew.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm gonna skip past Genesis 14 unless you want to mention about the original, the OG tithing.
Yeah, because it's kind of weird, isn't it? This dude Melchizedek rocks up, and then Abraham's like, you know what, mate, I'm going to give you 1/10 of everything. And it's just effectively the first time that the Bible specifies about giving 10% of something. So yeah, Genesis 14:20 towards the end there. Yeah, that's it, really, nothing much.
I feel like we should just mention tithing, since it's a pretty big deal and it's right there. So I'm glad you noted that, mate. So then Genesis 15, there's a lot to say in the last 3-4 minutes that we have. So do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield, your very great reward. So again, just God reassuring. He takes Abraham out and looks up, tells him to look up at the sky, and you can count the stars. If indeed you can count them, so shall your offspring be. Genesis 15:5. Like, just imagine how amazing it would be to be that tight with God, and to have God. I mean, we are, but to be right there physically with God and him telling you these messages.
Could you imagine how banging it would have been to, like, you've traveled a fair bit, so have I, to some, quiet little remote places and looked up at the sky. But we've got nothing based on the kind of night sky these guys were looking at, with zero light pollution outside of a bit of flame and a torch here and there. Like, just unreal. It's just, how could you believe it? It's so impossible. Massive.
There's that, and then something that I just thought of from what you just said is also just imagine the beauty of that as well. So it's the number, but it's also the beauty, like how inspiring that is. And then of course we have the covenant, right? And so that's 15:10, the cutting the animals in halves, and so on. Now, I looked into this, and apparently in that culture at that time, that was the way that covenants and deals were done between people. So it's, again, God meeting us where we are, because some people sort of think it's a bit weird that animals are being cut in half and so on. And it's like, fair enough, in 2021 it would be a bit weird if I made an agreement with you by cutting something in half, probably, right? But back then, this is how things were done. So it's God's just working through things that we can understand, meeting us where we are, all that good stuff. But it's not easy, is it? Because for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved.
Wild, isn't it? And I love how he actually goes to Egypt because of the famine, which is where he gives Sarai to Pharaoh and gains his wealth. But then it's going back to Egypt that they're going to be slaves further down the road. So it comes full circle, right? But 400 years, like, that's a long old time to be waiting.
Yeah. And what I think is, it's merciful that God actually tells Abram it's going to be 400 years. Like, he didn't have to tell him. He could just say, hold on, sunshine, it's going to happen eventually. It's on my timing, not yours. But he doesn't do that. He tells Abram this. He decides to reveal that to Abraham. And that's how close Abram was with God.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
And I suppose it's even a bit of a reminder for, like, when we're praying for people and that, really, if we don't see answers, be patient. Like, God's got it under control. It's frustrating, don't get me wrong, but stay true, stay faithful, just keep praying, keep asking, keep being obedient to what God's calling you to do, right?
Absolutely. And as we see through Abram as well, you can be in a very dark, kind of turbulent place, and God can lift you out of it in just a moment, as long as you have faith. And I just think that is part of the story of Abram. And even if you're not a great person,
Yeah.
he's a liar. And anyways, so
smashing. Well, that's the end of this day. If you have any questions, visit the Facebook page, 2 Brits and a Bible.
Or you can email us at 2britsbible@gmail.com.